Friends, good evening. Some certainties today about Air India 171, that Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which crashed during takeoff from Ahmedabad. It was heading to EGKK Gatwick near London. 230 passengers, 12 crew, total 242 people. Nearly everyone was lost. There might be one survivor, but confirmation will come in the next few days. So today, I'd like to go over a number of points which are to be confirmed in the next days. Because when I made the first video, we were talking about yesterday, it was likely that today we have a few things that we can establish, things we can practically write in stone with tangible elements. Just a philosophical aside. In this channel's videos and also in my books, I don't use the Cartesian method as some have suggested in the comments. I'm not Cartesian at all. On the contrary, I think that in a plane crash or a complex situation like such an event, the Cartesian method can lead you straight into a wall. Isn't that right? Many, like newspapers and analysts, hit a wall. I use a method that is closer to John Locke's philosophy and David Hume. It's more of an empiricist philosophy. Just for a quote, I couldn't elaborate further because that's not the purpose of the channel. But John Locke said that you should raise your level of conviction to the level of the available evidence. Isn't that right? Whereas in a Cartesian approach, it would be more like taking an evidence, something that we will postulate in an axiomatic way. An evidence that is so important, which strikes the mind so much that it seems true, isn't it? Like, for example, they forgot the shutters, isn't it? And from there, isn't it? Once it is formulated in an elegant way, it becomes true and we will want to prove it by all means. That's the Cartesian method, and unfortunately, I don't find it suitable for this kind of event, isn't it? So today, I would like to talk to you about a few extremely important details. First, we found the wings, so there is a wing. You can clearly see the plane's registration on it. It's burned, isn't it? There are traces of fire on it because the plane was taking off with a lot of fuel and we saw the flames go up and everything. So there was a very, very big fire. Now, if you look at the configuration of the flaps and the leading edge slats of the 787, you realize that they're extended on the wing, aren't they? That's undeniable. These can't extend or retract after impact. Their mechanism is irreversible. So if you look at the wing, you see that the flaps are extended. How much? I see 5. Someone else might say they see 15. Possibly that's it. But the flaps were clearly extended. At this point, we have some certainty about that. Another thing, there's a photo which was shared by the media, a photo where you see rescuers and people picking up pieces of the plane and all that. And actually, there's a really striking detail. And I want to thank a friend of mine, a mechanic certified on the 787, who drew my attention to this detail. I'm going to show you the photo in case you notice something in this photo. There's a flap that's open, this flap. It's opened by a mechanism that won't open because of an impact, nor will it close because of an impact. Once again, it's a mechanism that doesn't allow for reversibility. That means either it's powered by a system that rotates or it won't move. And this valve, what is it? It's the valve of the auxiliary power unit. What does that mean? At takeoff, we have an auxiliary power unit that is turned off. And what happens is that at some point when we look at the remains of the plane, we see that the valve, the flap of the auxiliary power unit is open. Why? That's because it proves to us that the auxiliary power unit started its auto start sequence. The auxiliary power unit began to start up, right? Why? Because the first thing, the auxiliary power unit, I want to thank a friend who is captain on a 787. The auxiliary power unit takes 1 minute and 40 seconds to come online after you press the start button or it begins auto start. So in reality, this auxiliary power unit started to power up. But actually, since the flight lasted less than 30 seconds, it never fully powered up. It never came online. But the fact that this valve was found in the open position proves that it had started its auto start sequence. One of the reasons it started the auto start is that it was the first engine that failed. So there's an engine which fails, bam, it goes into auto start because this plane consumes a lot of electricity. And we assume that if an engine fails, well, we're going to start putting a bit too much strain on the other one. And we're going to have to get energy from the auxiliary power unit. So we'll start the auxiliary power unit, which actually provides electrical power. So there's that. Of course, following the noise from yesterday's video, we know that the ram air turbine was deployed. By the way, for families, the ram air turbine deploys abruptly, driven by a spring, and faces the relative wind with significant force. It has a propeller. A propeller is like a blade. It has sharp edges. So indeed, you could potentially, if you're visiting an aircraft, if you're doing a major inspection of an aircraft, walking around it, you could get hit by the ram air turbine. And it can hurt really, really badly. It can injure you. It can even kill you, because it's something that comes out with a certain force. Once it comes out, it cannot be retracted in flight anymore in any way. There's no way to bring it back in flight. So these elements now start to show us a very particular situation. It's that we have a failure of two engines, one and then the other, okay? The first engine fails, the other will immediately follow. In the end, there are only two options left. No matter how we see it, just two paths remain. First, failure of the first engine, and someone in the cockpit rushes and goes to shut it down. In their mind, the engine failed. He shuts down the good engine, causing engine failure. A few seconds later, clack, and there, it's the good engine that's shut down. And the plane no longer has any engines running. This is the first failure. And it relates to what I told you in the second video yesterday, where it seemed that one of the engines of this particular plane showed some worrying signs. Not long ago, all right? It showed some worrying signs, but in the end, well, it was accepted, put back into service, and it broke down. So now the other option. To stop the engine, I'll show you a picture taken on a 787. A friend sent it to me. Well, he was reading one of my books. It's not hidden advertising or anything, but well, he was reading one of my books that you'll see in the photo. And you'll see these two buttons, right? These two big buttons, they control the fuel supply actually. And so someone took one of the switches, click, and they shut down the wrong engine. That's already happened. That's been seen before. For example, remember this Taiwanese airline, right? Where they had shut down, where they had shut down the wrong engine. The failed propeller engine is an aircraft manufacturer. And then the guys, they shut down the second engine and then they go down towards the ground, and unfortunately they're going to crash. So it's something that has already been seen. It's not unheard of, even though in a way we think it's too soon. That means, okay, we don't have an engine. All right, no engine. Well, we're going to reach 400 feet. We'll retract the landing gear. We'll level out the trajectory, right? And then after that, we'll start thinking, the engine has failed. Which one? We'll shut it down. Now, the sequence of both engines failing seems a bit too quick for that, unless we accept it. The plane has crashed. Something didn't go as usual. We believe it's either technical or human. So, unless we accept that there was an engine failure, and literally one of the pilots, in the time it takes to count to 3 in his head, he goes straight to the engine lever, then click. He shuts it down. He says, oops, we shut down the wrong one. It's possible from a human perspective, right? But it's still hard to believe. We instinctively resist when we hear that version. Naturally, our orthodox side will say it's not possible. Except that there was a crash after all, that's a fact. We inevitably have to end up at the crash no matter what we do. The other option is that the pilots didn't do anything wrong, didn't make any mistakes, they increased the throttle. Takeoff, positive rate of climb, boom, click, they show the thing. We have the actuator, I'll show you the image, the actuator of the landing gear actuator that's going to tilt the landing gear. So they tilted 12 degrees backward. They're going to tilt 12 degrees forward, so 24 degrees. We're going to make a small movement of 24 degrees. Click. And at that moment, complete hydraulic cutoff. That means the second engine just failed, it means. You could put it that way. Look, you could say that we take off, right? We take off with a potential engine failure. Maybe after V1, right? Decision speed rather. Decision speed, engine fails, we accelerate, we still take off. Gear up, clack, second engine goes out. We're talking about just 5 or 10 seconds after both engines fail. So as I was saying, he retracts the landing gear, we stop there, second engine shuts down, the ram air turbine. The ram air turbine, I'll show you the hydraulic circuit of the ram air turbine, because yesterday I told you I bet my hand that it doesn't allow the landing gear to retract. Today I'm pleased to announce that I get to keep this. Because if you look at the hydraulic circuit in the diagram, it powers circuit C, and this circuit in fact can retract the landing gear. Except that there's a one-way valve, a check valve that points toward the ram air turbine. That means the pressure coming from the ram air turbine will go to the flight controls first as a priority. And this valve prevents it from going to the landing gear because it's not considered a priority. In any case, retracting can't be considered a priority in such circumstances. So the landing gear can't be retracted by the ram air turbine. The ram air turbine, you can hear the noise, right? And so our plane is starting to come back down to the ground. In this second scenario, both engines stopped on their own. The pilots did nothing wrong. They just experienced it, accelerated, and took off. Bam, first engine fails. All right, boom, second engine fails. We're going down. It's possible. Remember, I talked to you about it not long ago on this channel. The British Airways 777, it has Rolls-Royce engines. The British Airways 777s, both heat exchangers were frozen. There was no bypass on them because it was not considered necessary to have one. Bam, the plane crashed. Fortunately, there were no deaths. All that. But if it had been a plane making an approach to an airport a bit different from Heathrow, right? Where he was lucky to have a clear area and all that, but it could have ended extremely badly. So I can't rule out that both engines stopped one after the other, like that. And that later on we'll say, yes, there was a condition, very rare, due to a software bug, all of that, a choice. All the more, I'd like to tell you something. This 787 plane is one of the first that was made. That means it's old. It's from 2011. It's from the time when the 787 Dreamliner was released. By the way, you can see it in Air France, for example, a French airline. You notice that the planes that are at the very beginning of the series, like cars, by the way, they're generally not the best. Because sometimes there are choices that were made, which later on in operation we realize, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. And later on, we improve. But we're not going to retrofit the first ones in the series, you know? That's why companies that buy the very first ones usually face some hassle. If I had my own company, honestly, I assure you that if the plane doesn't fly for at least 10 years, I wouldn't sign, you know. That's it. I think it's something to keep in mind. So there's that. Either an engine problem or potentially a fuel problem. You know, when there's a plane crash, whether it's a commercial flight or even a crash of an aero club plane, it takes off, the propeller stops, it falls. Always. The investigator's first reflex is to seal the truck that delivered the fuel. If it's a tank, well, they seal the tank, the documents, the pipes, all of that, all the equipment is sealed. And then it has to be analyzed because indeed, what is there? What is common between the two engines? What do they have in common? They're independent and redundant. Still, the 777, British Airways Flight 38, well, it crashed despite the redundancy I just mentioned to you. But if we look at these engines, if there's something they have in common, it's definitely the fuel. So if it took adulterated fuel contaminated with water, with anything else, I don't know. We need to see if there was any maintenance at the airport, if they had installed pipes, if they had You can't know. He could end up with fuel that's, let's say, of poor quality, right? To put it nicely. From there, well, you can have the damage you saw, right? That means the pilots did absolutely nothing wrong. Engines 1 and 2 stopped one after another, right? You get it. You might say other planes took off earlier without issues, but sensitivities differ, so it's not the same for every plane and you can't predict it. It happened here. It's an Airbus, I think, that made it through, but it was very close to being a tragedy. There was water, they pumped water, antifreeze stuff, additives into the fuel. Well, he was the only one who got hurt, the others didn't. I mean, sometimes it just takes one just a little bit, that's all. So, we'll see in the future. Personally, if there are any new information, I'll come back. Of course, that's the purpose of this channel. It's a channel which is specialized in aviation. So if there are new things, I'll return to this. If there aren't any new things, we won't discuss this story again until the final report or vital information is released. In any case, thank you for listening to this video up to this point. Thank you for your support and your comments. Feel free to subscribe to this channel, and then I'll see you in the next video. See you very soon.